Tell me about the cannons and the gun collection.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you want to know?
What do you remember?
Well, I remember we had to oil them down once in a while. Had to keep them dusted. Had a lot of people who would come in and want to look at them. They used to be everywhere, and when we moved in, we dedicated one room for the gun room, and that's where you have your washer and dryer now. And the bathroom's been extended into that room, but basically that was the gun room. And you had most of them there. His chest of drawers in his bedroom was full of nothing but pistols. He slept with a Army revolver. Was 71, 1871, 73. It was
Single action?
single action,
Yeah,
single action
73
Colt.
73 Colt
Antique
revolver.
Yeah.
guns. That's how you get them cheap, right? You buy the guns nobody wanted, right? You go to sales and auctions and people
Oh, yeah.
hold on to
Oh,
newer
yeah.
guns. You buy all the old guns.
Oh, and in friendship,
Some-
you'd have people trading guns down there all the time. So I mean, just he picked them up and sold them, and he horse traded them. But the gun collection was interesting because he always had the gun under his pillow. And we only had one bathroom in the house, so if you came downstairs in the middle of the night, you had to walk past his bedroom. And if you disturbed him, he'd go, "Who's there?" Well, if he said, "Who's there?" he normally had his gun in his hand, right? So you'd have to say, "It's me, Grandpa," whatever, and he'd go, "Okay." And that's what it was. But now, come to think of it, the bathroom thing. We had a bathroom when we were living there later on, but I remember on our visits in the summer times,
No bathroom.
no bathroom. It was outside, and that was fun too. But yeah, that's a different story. Anyway, we played with bullets instead of toy soldiers. Would line them up, right?
Tell them about making bullets in the kitchen.
Oh yeah, would heat the lead on the stove, and would have the molds
These
and stuff.
rifles shot lead bullets. Little
And it was all muzzleloaders.
Tell them about the rifling machine. The rifling machine.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
that was
yeah,
the old
had a
house.
rifle.
He used to make his own guns. He liked bench shooting. Bob Tingle was a manufacturer of guns. So it was kind of funny. Bob Tingle would give him serial number 1 of every model Tingle pistol or rifle made.
Yeah.
And Grandpa thought that was really cool because he had the number 1 gun off the assembly line. And the answer was no, because Bob let him know years later that there was a Tingle 0.
That he kept for himself.
And he kept it.
Do you know what a bench gun
Like your
is?
brother up.
Okay, tell her what a bench gun is.
A bench gun is a very long, heavy rifle that you cannot lift. You have to rest it on something in order to shoot it. When Grandpa wanted to wake us up in the summertime, because if we slept past 6 o'clock, he'd get mad. Mom would say, "Let him sleep," right? And he'd go out on the porch and shoot a gun, right, to wake everybody up. Once in a while, he did that even after he was in his wheelchair, because he'd get outside and shoot the gun, and then he wasn't able to get back in, so we'd have to come back down and let him in. But yeah, we had cannons. I've got one out here in the barn that if a little bit later on we can load it up and shoot it so you can take a picture of it. But he bored that out. He made that cannon. He bored it out to fire corn cobs, because corn cobs were plentiful. Everybody had corn cribs, and that's before they had the shelled corn when they harvested and everything else. And it was a lot of fun to shoot. So,
Well, there's one other thing you forgot to tell about.
what's that?
We kept all the rifles with the bayonets still on them lined up in the hallway
Oh yes.
by the stairwell, which made sliding down the banister really interesting, because if you fell...
Yeah. They used to be right back here.
There were a lot of them.
Right.
We were always told that they were loaded, so we didn't play with them. Well, we did, but we didn't. We'd touch them, but we didn't actually play with them.
Yeah.
But and the dining room was not a dining room; it was the gun room, and that's what it was called, the gun room. At least when I was growing up.
Well, when we played Army, as kids, me and my brothers would use real guns. When we played Cowboys and Indians, we'd use real guns. You know?
And in case you think that Tommy's exaggerating, I remember playing Monopoly, and it was the year Dirty Harry came out, and they all went out and bought 357 Magnums, and they would play Monopoly and threaten to shoot the other one if they called rent or whatever. It was interesting.
I wasn't there for that.
I was.
Oh, that's funny.
but we-
well, I have a Meltzer in relationship to the Meltzer Woods, in protection of that woods. You know, my grandfather had all these sawmills, but he never ever touched his own trees, ever. It's interesting that those trees have been there since the Frederick Meltzer, you know, got the land and protected. And Frederick Meltzer was a carpenter; he was a master carpenter. So these were people who loved and appreciated wood. But two things would happen out in the country. One was kids would come and steal gasoline, because of course if you had farm machinery, you had gasoline on the property. So the lights that lit things up were not as good. There was lighting where the gas tanks were, but it wasn't all that great. And there were beautiful walnut trees, and some of them have fallen and return to nature, because that's what you do when you have virgin timber and you want your woods to stay natural. So two things might happen out in the country: is somebody come steal gas, or timber thieves would mark trees and then come and cut them down at night. So every now and then we'd hear shooting on the porch. My mother would go out and shoot a gun off the porch and say, "The sheriff's coming," because the sheriff got called, and we didn't know whether they were stealing gasoline. Well, you figured it out because they'd be peeling away. They were trying to steal gas. Or it was a timber thief. And Uncle Philip used to go through the woods regularly, 3-4 times a week, looking for marks by timber thieves, always knowing where the expensive trees were and checking. And once we saw marks, the sheriff would be called. It was quite a lot to keep the woods protected all those years. But everybody knew this farm was armed and dangerous.
Yeah, one of the strangest events that happened is we had a motorcycle gang. They were in cars out of Indianapolis, came through the woods, and we were having a family party. And kind of a mini reunion, I guess. It wasn't a big family reunion, just cousins and whatever. And my brother Jim, because they were shooting there by the ditch. And so my brother Jim went down and asked them not to shoot, because we had kids running around in the woods and whatnot. It wouldn't have been safe. And they took a pot shot towards his feet and said, you know, "Get out of here." So he came back and he described what was going on. And about that time, Uncle Larry loaded up a rifle or two, got in the pickup truck, went through the woods because he was worried about his house on the other side.
Yeah.
Shotguns were in her hands. I was on the phone with the state police, and because Grandpa didn't trust the sheriff, he said, "Call the state police," right? So I was on the phone with the state police, and these people turned around and kind of cruised slowly past the front of the house, and there must have been 8 people out there with rifles standing behind trees that they were looking at. And they decided that they'd just keep driving on. So they drove on down towards the big flowered hedge that we used to have towards Melcherville, and stopped. It took the state police 14 minutes to arrive. The sheriff arrived about 2 minutes after the state police did, and the one trooper, they charged him for vagrancy.